welcome. Greetings and salutations. Come on in. Glad to see your face in the place. Come on in. Come back home to Africa. The fatty calf and golden rain are waiting for you once again. Coming back to you. I'm longing for my family. Coming back to you. Out of bondage and now I am free. Da 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 da. Greetings, Keona D. Carter, beloved. Come on in, moderator. Come on in. Come on in. Come back home to Africa. The fatty calf and golden rain are waiting for you once again. Waiting for you to watch, Sherrod. Greetings, beloved. Greetings and salutations. I'm longing for my family. Come on in. Out of bondage and now I am free. Da 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 da. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Come back home to Africa. Come back home. Greetings, welcome, beloved. Come on in. All is a blessing. Greetings, divine, all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity, manifestation and revelations. You are now sitting live with the Divine Prince. Alafia, Peleo, Yahuru Waku, Jambo, Akwaba, Kedu, Bawani. Come on in, welcome. All is truly and indeed a blessing. You are listening now live to the Divine Prince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye, Hoodoo Obeya Bokor, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is indeed my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, and it is my ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation upon which I stand on, my inner being, my walk, my service, my demonstration in this most present moment in time space on Mother, Father Earth. It is indeed my place of beginning, my place from where I crystallize and realize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. Asheo. Ashe. Today is Monday, July 6, 2020, and I am emanating and vibrating with you and for you now live, virtually, verbally, cosmically, quantum universally, from this working temple of the House of the Divine Prince, Thai Potions, Hoodoo Central LLC, in this beautiful, historic, most enchanted, and some would say most haunted city in America, New Orleans, Louisiana, the land of my ancestors and those who came before me along this Hoodoo Obeah life path and journey, passing down the great Obeah stick, along with the knowledge of the life-giving herbs, roots, plants, rituals, spirits, minerals, indeed the legacy, the culture and traditions, the history, our sacred stories, our sacred stories. And I remind you always to visit us at oursacredstories.com for your tour plus experience. All is truly and indeed a blessing. I am always humbled, honored, grateful by the numbers of people who choose to turn up at high noon U.S. Central Standard Time and wherever you might be on the globe. I've showed our map. We reach people in Ghana. We reach people in Nigeria. Indeed, I have people love you in Brazil. We reach Haiti. We reach the UK. We reach the US. Indeed, the transatlantic Pan-African diaspora. And a party to that, critical to that, is the creation of sacred space. For indeed, we create sacred space, and all things that we do and say and believe and truly and indeed understand. It is the creation of sacred space that is the foundation of all that we would seek to manifest. First, that which would be created within that sacred space, the sacredness in which we attribute it to our bodies and to our health and to the amount of water we get and how much nutrients we take in. And of course, that which then manifests in our energy, in our ashe, in our voodoo, if you will. We always start on a platform of acknowledgement of the ancestors. And they would have me to ask questions today. Indeed, what is the last thing you've done for your ancestors? What indeed is the most recent thing you've done to bring healing, to bring power, empowerment, to bring knowledge and wisdom to and through your ancestors? Indeed, what can you do right now to acknowledge those who came before? Indeed, those most powerful shoulders upon which we all now have this present being and standing. It's a bit arrogant of us, Pan-African spiritualists, ATR practitioners, hoodoo, root work, conjure adherents. It is blasphemous of us to not acknowledge the ancestry, the lineage, the bloodline, the history that came before, and what our ancestors had to sacrifice in blood, in sweat, in tears, for you to now stand up and offer love spells, for you to now stand up and offer people an opportunity to hit the lotto, but you're not addressing the root. Root workers, where my root workers at? You're not addressing the root. You're not addressing the cause. You're not addressing the foundation. You're not addressing the infection. And indeed, it is something that can be healed, something that can be removed. And the first thing that we can do, the foundational thing that we can do is to acknowledge those who came before. Is to acknowledge those ancestors who paved the way. Good or bad, right or wrong, left or right, up or down. We love to say there's no good and evil in ATR, which ain't true, by the way, but some of y'all like to say that. We love to say this ain't religion, this is spirit and spirituality. Some of you like to say that, but indeed, your ancestors stand up in your blood. They stand up in your very DNA. They stand up in your very cell. They are present at your birth. Indeed, they are present at your transition. Indeed, they are present in every moment in time space in which we move forward in this dimensional space that we call Earth and our life and our existence on Earth. So we must, not just on the ritual calendar days, Egungun, Mopeo, but every day. I acknowledge my ancestors. I often get asked, well, how often and how much and how serious are you? What do you acknowledge in you? What have they done for you? That's how much. That's how much. So for me, I have a whole room. In fact, I have two, just for the ancestors. And they're not limited there, of course. Their footprint can be found all over the house. But indeed, they have their sacred space. We also acknowledge those other great powers that stand up in the day. Yeah, Obatala, Iyami, and of course, Omolu, Babalu Oye. We cannot neglect the power and the strength in the antidote that is Babalu Oye, the ability to heal. I read a post yesterday, a news article yesterday, that Nigeria was fighting to have, I believe, their government or what constitutes the administrative governing aspect of their medical industry over there to look at and investigate herbs and the scientific medicinal healing application of herbs. And indeed, I say it all the time. I probably said it yesterday. I'll probably say it again tomorrow. There is no Ifa without voodoo. There is no voodoo without Ifa. Some of you remember Oba Obatala to the US came here, sat right there, and said those very words. There is no Ifa without voodoo. There is no voodoo without Ifa. You ask questions of lineages are missing key components to what lineage is. So it's not a matter of am I Ifa or am I voodoo? It's a matter of are you Igbo? Are you Hausa? Are you Yoruba? Are you Akan? Are you Fan? So we acknowledge the Orixa because the Orixa is so powerful. The Orixa is so loved. The Orixa is so popular. But we acknowledge all the powers that stand up in our bloodlines, in our lineage. And so when I say voodoo, it's indeed voodoo worldwide. It's indeed pan-African. It's indeed trans-African when I say voodoo. Some of you say, well, we need to take back certain words and we need to change the meaning of certain words and we need to reclaim certain words. I reclaim voodoo for the African born in America. I claim voodoo. If Candomblé belongs to Brazil, if Lucumi belongs to Cuba, if Maria Leonza belongs to Venezuela, voodoo belongs to me. Voodoo belongs to the African born in this America. And its manifestations. I reclaim all of its manifestations: protective, defensive, offensive magic. I reclaim them all back to me. So they would be revived, renewed, reutilized in the continuation of liberation and freedom that we continue to fight and get evidence of each and every day. I strive not to talk about the daily news, though I check it. I strive not to talk about the weather, though I check it. So make no mistake about it. I'm fully aware of what's going on around us, as I pray many of you would be also. And my hope is that we would utilize that strength, that power that's available to us to not only fight, but to heal and transform and change. I'm concerned about the transformation. I'm not concerned about the battle. I'm not concerned about the fight. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about the transition and our ability to transcend, to reform ourselves individually, collectively, as families, as communities, communities with particular mindsets. So now we got to pass through the gates of politics and the gates of religion and all these other things that cloud our ability sometimes to just see truth and humanity for what it is. I acknowledge you, each and every one of you, individually and collectively, who takes the time out of your day to be present. I know what it takes to be present. I have to do it often every day. I know what it takes to be present. So I acknowledge you, and I'm indeed honored. I wanted to also acknowledge Maafa. Many of you know that not only does Essence Fest typically happen right now over the course of this past weekend, but also the first Saturday in every July, we acknowledge Maafa here in the city of New Orleans. I understand Maafa is acknowledged, commemorated, not all at the same day or the same time everywhere in the nation or even in the world, much like we're looking at Juneteenth. Some might suggest it. Some might suggest it. I know for here, local culture here, these dates tend to roll one into the other. Juneteenth, and then you got your 4th of July for whatever its meaning is, and we acknowledge while all of that's going on here, we typically acknowledge Maafa. And of course, you understand why it didn't happen this year. You can thank your girlfriend, Miss Corona-19, COVID-19, for why it didn't happen this year physically. But indeed, it happens in the spirit realm. It happens somewhere else in the spirit realm. Those of us who thought about it, meditated on it, prayed on it, felt its presence within us or its lack of presence within us, we indeed cannot just move forward and not acknowledge it. For my new listeners, for my young listeners, for the beginner, Maafa is the African Holocaust of enslavement or Black Holocaust. Are political neologisms, 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 popularized from 1998 into the present and used to describe the history and ongoing effects of atrocities inflicted on African people, particularly when committed by non-Africans, Europeans and Arabs to be exact, specifically in the context of the history of slavery, including the Arab slave trade and the Atlantic slave trade, and argued as continue to this present day through imperialism, colonialism, and other forms of oppression, like white supremacy and racism, which we're acknowledging today in the weather of today. For example, Maulana Karenga put slavery in the broader context of the Maafa, suggesting that its effects exceed more physical persecution and legal disenfranchisement. The destruction of human possibility involved redefining African humanity to the world, poisoning past, present, and future relationships with others who only know us through the stereotyping and thus damaging the truly human relations among peoples. And that's indeed how we must, you can Wikipedia that, by the way, Maafa, Maafa. And that last part particularly reminds me of PTSD, white supremacy and all of its arms and legs, and how that shows up in sort of covert ways in our culture, in our society. And my favorite area to zero in on, of course, is spirituality and religion, and how that shows up in how we view God, how we've been taught to view God, and therefore how we've been taught to view ourselves, and particularly the blackness of ourselves. Indeed, it is seen as niggardly, even in the book, the magical book. So undoing the idea of black as dark, as demonic, as dangerous, as wicked, as evil, has all of its roots, all of its tentacles, all of its arms, all of its extensions back into white supremacy. I got a friend, family. I don't want to be too specific. I got a friend, family, cohort who believes it's all wicked, who believes all of this is wicked. Any idea of Africa, any idea of voodoo, any idea of Ifa, any idea of indigenous practice and understanding, to quote specifically, it's all wickedness and doomed to hell. Now, mind you, this person don't even go to church. This person probably ain't read more than a passage out of the Bible in the course of their, many decades of life. So the idea, the notion that it's not me, it doesn't affect me, I'm not a product of it, it's something that in itself we need to heal. Because if you grew up here, if you were born and raised here, you're affected, you're infected. And unless you take conscious effort to undo that programming, it shows up everywhere. And it's reinforced everywhere with our so-called holidays, which I primarily see as, commercial events. The sales, the advertisement, the induction that if you don't participate, you're not a regular American, you're not a normal American. Somehow, if your house don't have a tree, and Santa Claus and stuff underneath it, that you're not participating. So even holidays, I take with a very specific grain of salt. I take time to meditate. I often get quiet during holidays and really think about, what does the fourth really mean to the slave? What does the fourth really mean to the descendants thereof? And we like to push it all back into, 400 years ago, without connecting to what's happening now, what continued to happen 10 years ago, 20 years ago, etc. I am in that class of people who question the end date, the period date on slavery and enslavement. I've seen it transform. I've seen it renewed. I've seen it become something else in the context of what's happening at any specific time in history. But I am not for sure about where to put that point, where to put that ending. And therefore, the idea of us conquering white supremacy, conquering racism, you understand that this is going to be a longer going process than COVID-19. You do understand. If people are really going to do the work, this just like the season, it's not going to pass overnight. It's not going to pass in 14 days. It's not going to pass in 90 days. And according to what we're being prepared for now, we're looking for at least a year or more out. And those of us in this room, the erudite in this room, we've been talking about that since March 7th, since March 9th. the idea that we will be in a whole pattern for at least a year, at least a year. This is the time to do the work. This is the time to indeed connect with spirit. I'm looking at the nighttime sky, and what can be seen at night right now in New Orleans. It's just crazy. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and even astrology. We reduce that down, we water that down to a very basic, limited, construct, often referred to as horoscope. But it's a much more complex system of energy than that. And it resonates, with the tones and the notes on the piano. It resonates, with the vibrations and the tones that operate throughout humanity, that keep us whole, that keep us operating in what we call reality. Understanding that this is all just vibrating light. This is all just vibrating molecules and atoms that we've collectively agreed upon as our reality. And so string theory suggests that there's room to play in that. There's room to manipulate that a little bit. There's room to pull down and to hold on to that which is in our best interest, that blessing, that, you can call it an angel if you want to, that blessing, and force it to come upon us. Where people get stuck at is doing the work. Where people get stuck at is they don't want to have to do any work. They don't want to have to encroach upon study and realigning and reorganizing what we think, because it requires accepting what's not useful. It requires getting rid of what's not beneficial. And in a society where we're often pressured, in your peer group, in your family, community, circle, to be and look a certain way, this is revolutionary. This is revolutionary. This voodoo that we're now stepping into, that we're now bringing forward for the next 100 years is revolutionary. Understand that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren will have a very different connection to their ancestors and to their roots than what we had in the 60s and the 70s. Indeed, in the 50s and the 40s. Indeed, before this technology, this DNA technology became available to us, widely available to us at a price range, and an ease of access that's now available to us. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, Chef Bougie. Greetings, beloved. Greetings, Orixa. I hope you checked your email, beloved. I did respond to your Patreon request. Greetings, a Neophyte Bokor tourist. Welcome, welcome. Kiona D. Carter is our moderator. Please do give her all due respect as she helps me to navigate what I might be seeing or not seeing in our live and quickly moving chat box. Let me add her to the stream here. Yes, always the goddess initiative that don't really read, that don't really study the magical book, who believe it's their God-given right, to sort of police the world with it. And in this particular instance, I know who I'm talking about. I described him as friend, family, etc. I know who I'm talking about. Just like your friends, your family, your loved ones, the people that you grew up with, that you associated with. So when they step into these religious boxes, often it's in that immediate circle that people see what's real and what's not real. What happens, however, is that we remain quiet. We indirectly participate, in sort of this ruse, of people becoming something brand new, magically, overnight, with just a little bit of water, and a prayer. And we're not seeing them then demonstrate that every day where it matters, where it counts, on the ground. Greetings, beloved Kiona. Thank you for showing your
Greetings, how are
face.
you?
All is a blessing.
It seemed like heads rolled yesterday after my post. After
Which
my
post,
post, it seemed
beloved?
like heads rolled.
Yeah, I have no
Can you
idea
hear me?
what you're
Because I
talking.
can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, it did, but you gotta respect the voodoo. I'm
You
not
still can't.
interested in living in secret. I'm not interested in denying my truth to anyone. If anybody can accept me and who I walk with, I honor the dead. If they can't accept that, then I don't know what to tell them. Because someone tried to tell me the other day when they send me a scripture, someone sends me a scripture every day. I don't mind. And it says that slaves are to honor and obey their master. And I replied and I told them they were doing fine sending me scriptures until they sent me that one and that I didn't like it. So they said, no, that's not what that meant. That back in the biblical days, that being a slave was as if a homeless person was offered shelter by someone off the street. And so they were supposed to pay by honoring and obeying what they said. I said, no. I said, no, it's time for me to come on out and represent because people are playing right now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can a little bit.
Okay. Um, yeah, people are in their feelings, people are in their emotions. Many are still in denial of what I call the COVID-19 effect, you know, isolation for long periods of time, having their routine disrupted. So it affects many people at various levels. So this overt reaching out, you know, with these scriptures and these religious positioning, you know, is also a cry for help, a cry for acknowledgement. I believe because they often exist in sort of a cocoon. They only want to be around people who think like them, believe like them, understand the world like them. So now that we are in this, you know, unusual scenario, they're now pushed to their extreme in terms of who they peer group is, who they support group, who your support system is. And so I often get these communications from this particular individual when they're under some kind of distress. And they always have this overt religious overtone to it. Now you might be okay with it, but I particularly don't care for that. Uh, I believe that the day that I start sending out voodoo tracks and prophetizing and knocking at your door like the Jehovah Witness, then and only then is it okay for you to do that to me. You know, I'm not okay with the bombardment of overt religion from people, particularly when I don't present that type of demonstration myself. The instant messages, the DMs that we're all getting now that are just incessant traps, really, to get viruses on your device or to get access to your private information. So all these DMs and these instant messages are coming through. And that's one of the things, one of the tools they use, politics, religion, comedy, sex, you know, to sort of grab your attention. They're even using very creative wording now. Oh, I spent all this time creating this post about you. You absolutely need to see it, you know, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it reads like a spam and a scam to me. So I don't understand why it doesn't read that way to other people. But often they have, you know, the Christian overtone, the religious overtone. Now we're getting the patriotic overtone. And in many cases, I don't even think these people are real, Kiona, to be quite honest. When I double check in a Twitter or in a Facebook feed, you know, the profile, I see profiles that haven't been posted on in 6 months, 9 months. I see profiles that only have one or two of the same exact photo duplicated, you know, here lately, often with patriotic symbols, flags, golden eagles, you know, and these could very well be these Russian cohorts. These are very well be COINTEL, operatives right here in America that are strongly trying to influence politics. And yes, politics, but then it affects people at such deeper levels than just politics, because it affects how you shop, how you live, what you prepare for, what you may worry or not worry about. So there's all this energy attached to all this, posting and media every day. I mean, for the media who might need to work for a story during normal season, everything is a story now. From race to the COVID-19, to the behavior of our leaders. Everything, is a salacious media production right now. So it's absolutely easy for people who aren't paying attention, who maybe can't discern truth as readily or as quickly as the next person, to really be deceived right now, to really be beguiled right now. So I feel it at every level. I feel it. I told you in a previous show, I'm only getting maybe 4 hours of sleep right now, a day, while this season sort of moves through. And when I'm up, I'm doing readings, I'm doing consultation, I'm doing the work. Many of you are addressing ancestral work. Many of you are addressing your head, right now, which is the right thing to do, and not just addressing the weather of today, but how we then prepare and move forward in this. If you're counting days, we're already well over 120 days into this. So any ideas that you had of temporary early on, I'm sure have now been adjusted, have now shifted a little bit. Any idea of the new normal should really be settling in on you and on many people right now. So let me make sure I'm acknowledging everyone. My phone lines are open at area code 845-277-9143, 845-277-9143. I'm not sure of the quality, so let me know. Yes, Keisha Smith, it's that God smell, it's that God spell. And it's a tough one to break, particularly for someone who's not um, there, who's not trying to make it make sense, who's not trying to they're operating on quote unquote faith, which is what I was told, so it ain't supposed to make sense. You're just supposed to step into it, and believe it for what they say it is. And yeah, I call that the God spell for sure. Let's see, what's that about Marvel Studios, Neophyte, Bokor? Let me go back. Marvel Studios can respect it to use it in their movies and TV shows, but we can't respect it to know it's our culture and the missing element to our collective amnesia. Um, I agree with
Exactly.
that on so many levels. So many levels. Again, I get the individual who suggests that somehow my life isn't real. Somehow what I do isn't real. Yet, my lights are on. I'm broadcasting every day. I'm masking, ending every ceremony, and still in their mind, it goes, Keon, it goes back to the white man's ice is colder. The white man's water tastes better. It really goes back to that mindset. And so there are people who really believe that if you aren't living this American Christian dream, that you're operating in some kind of illusion, if not a delusion. While they struggle through, which I don't get it. You know, if it's working, why isn't it working for you? you know, if it's so working, and why do you need to constantly project it back at me? And I think it has everything to do with our demonstration. They sit and watch us. They listen to us. They absorb our demonstration. They observe our demonstration, and because they can't make that shift, they have to find it to be wicked. They have to find it to be somehow evil. And then when your government leaders sort of support that level of thinking, what is a person with sense to do right now, other than to live your life and to make sure you vote? What else is a sensible person supposed to do right now? You could literally get yourself worked up into a frenzy if you pay attention too much to it, and what he has to say, and what he has to say that's being then projected out into the world. If I had my way, the media would ignore him altogether. We would hear nothing about the president unless it came through someone else, some other branch of the government, and they presented it. If I controlled all the media outlets, and of course I don't, so I have to control me and how much of it I listen to, how much of it I take in. But man, it's crazy that it's coming down through other people, and people that we don't suspect. Y'all better pay attention to that black vote. Y'all better pay attention. It's a number of black people, and I'm going to say it, black men who voted for Donald Trump. Y'all need to understand, they talk about this invisible group of supporters that don't, it's politically incorrect for them to come out in their communities and say, oh, well, I'm a black Republican, or I voted for Trump, or whatnot. We think all the Trump supporters are white, and that's not the truth. So those people even are now, should be rightfully so, in some bit of a conflict right now. Because how do you now ignore race? How do you now ignore ethnicity? How do you now ignore disenfranchisement in the environment in which we're existing now? Kiona, who's them two black women that be at his rallies, that's got a real popular YouTube channel somewhere? I don't know their names.
I don't either, but they are some straight up certified buffoons.
Oh my God, when I see them, it's just crazy.
Somebody said diamond and silk.
Oh, okay.
More like cubic zirconia and polyester.
Yes, indeed. The Goddess Initiative. I like that. Yes, you go into these nail shops, you go into these Chinese food restaurants, they have their shrines right there in your face. They have their altars right there in your face. And black folks love them some, shrimp fried rice and egg foo young, and some of y'all do, and so you've seen it. Especially if you live in DC, Chicago, Philly, New York, LA, often it's up high. My godchildren understand that altar that's way up high. They understand that at a very different level. And then they have one that's usually down at the counter. I used to feed one, support one back in the day. Oh, this was back in the day. Before Hurricane Katrina, back in the day. I used to be a street vendor. Some of y'all know that. And so I sold incense, hand dip incense, body oil, African jewelry, African statuary, whatever I could carry, cart, pull somewhere. And my favorite pop-up spot was the laundromat on Magazine Street. And so I had a bit of a relationship with that Asian family. And I gifted them a jade Buddha. I gifted them a fluorite Buddha. I gifted them a hematite Buddha. And they allowed me to set up there, without problem. Eventually, I ran into a problem with Sally Beauty Supply. But that's a whole nother story. I don't support Sally Beauty Supply, and I would prefer that none of you support Sally Beauty Supply. But we'll talk about that.
But they don't never have what I want, so I don't support them. But what is going on with Kanye West? Like, can somebody please call in the elders? Because this right here is nothing but a show.
Say that.
He's
Oh,
running for
Kanye.
president.
Yeah, yeah. That's what they say.
I'm gonna sign
That's.
off and come back on because I can't see my face on the screen. I'll come back.
I also heard that that it was an attempt to somehow divide that black vote that I just suggested to you. That might be hidden. That might be your brother, your sister, your auntie, your uncle, your cousin, who you think is cool as beans, at the backyard barbecue, but they're going into that booth and they're voting for Trump. You all need to understand that. And they have their reasons for doing so. I can't say that there are reasons that I accept or that I agree with, but indeed, I know for a fact that it has happened. And there's the risk that it could indeed happen again if people don't take up a stronger position about this coming election. I know we say in every election, oh, it's important that you vote. This is the most important election ever. We say that, I know, at every election. But, is that really a hard sell this time around? Do you all really get why this election is really that important? 4 more years of this could indeed solidify um, a new norm that many of us are not happy with. You know, I'm personally not willing to go into 4 more years of grab them by the pussy. I'm just not. I'm just not. I can't do it. I can't do it. Now YouTube, do what y'all want, but censor me, whatever. But I can't do it. I can't. Mm-mm, mm-mm. And some of the craziness that it is birthing at the grassroots level, black and white, who are now having those racial triggers strummed like a guitar, those ethnic triggers strummed, those class-oriented triggers strummed. I mean, it's almost like he wants chaos. It's almost like he, the orange guy, and his cohorts absolutely want chaos. Now we have to ask ourselves, why? Why? Who gets rich if we have chaos? Who earned money during the toilet paper debacle? Who made money? Like right now, you still can't buy no Lysol spray nowhere. You still can't buy Lysol spray anywhere. So come on now.
And they have
Something
it
ain't right.
that the truckers are going over to P&G and all the customers and the manufacturers and shipping them over, and then they sit in a warehouse, but they don't make it to the supermarket. Now you tell me that's a coinky dink.
And it's the
What
reasoning.
stocking up?
Are they still suggesting that all these truckers are sick, or all these factory workers are too sick with the coronavirus to work? Is that what they're still saying? Because if that's the case, when the last time you've heard that on TV? I mean, when's the last time you've seen Dr. Fauci and the president even do a press conference about this? It's almost like certain aspects of this you're not being told at all. And so it's only in this platform here, because we have truckers in this platform here. We have people who work in the system who participate on this show, that we have this knowledge. But you're not hearing it on TV. It's not in the 5 o'clock news, not on the channels that I've been watching and paying attention to. And even when I look at the international news, there's not a whole lot of discussion about the infrastructure and how that's being affected now. Last we heard, there was going to be a meat shortage. The meat prices were going up. I'm gonna say that was what, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and now we're not hearing anything except open up, and the numbers are getting high. Please, y'all, tell me you're paying attention.
We paying attention to all of it. We saw the distraction because in May Floyd, Floyd resting in his room, but that man was still on a mission.
Like
He did that. He was on an assignment to do that as a distraction. That's how I feel.
you know, I've been hesitant to say that out loud on air, but I get the same feeling. What other thing, what other event could happen right now? God and Satan himself had to have orchestrated this kind of crossroads
Because when has
where you
president to call a family of some of our we have been murdered. Even when Barack was on in office, when did he ever call the families and apologize? It is all of a sudden that the Donald calls and speaks with the family. No, no, this was a complete setup.
yeah, it's hard not to be a conspiracy theorist in the environment of what's happening right now. It's really not. And as I was saying, no God, no Satan could have better orchestrated this sort of crossroads of calamities that we're living and existing right now. And the one thing that would drive us out into the street in the middle of a pandemic would be one more black man being killed by the police. And like Keona's suggesting, this is unique. And how unique is it? And to what degree is it unique because of the pandemic? Uh, I just can't make sense of it. But my spirit nature, Neophyte Bokor, my spirit nature just can't let go the idea that there's some kind of consciousness behind these events happening right now at this one point in time space, and then ultimately having the effects that we're still seeing demonstrated.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up real quick, but I had to chime in on that last comment. You know, I'm out here. You know, I'm out here dealing with these people. Their struggle between whether or not they want to wear a mask or not, whether they want to require it to be a mask or not. On top of, you know, is there some sort of orchestration going on? There's somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings. I personally think so, but just the sheer amount of ignorance that's out here, you know, people that's just not aware and stuck in their own little bubble about what they believe. That little bubble of theirs is the whole world for some reason. And I'm like, you're not taking in anything from the outside, really take from somebody else's point of view.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me personally, but these products that we still need. I mean, I'm riding down the highway just last week, and there's a spill of masks on the highway that the sheriff's department and the construction crews are trying to clean up by hand to get it off the highway as quickly as possible, because the masks are just fluttering around all over the place. Masks. The masks that we need, just spread out. I mean, just blowing in the wind, right near a fire, right near a bighorn fire. And these masks are just flailed out all over the interstate. You know, that's a sidebar. I'll tell you about that later, about these fires.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know where Hoodoo occultism is. I need somebody to give us some clarity about the astrological weather right now and its effects on the diversity of calamities that are coming together at this one particular time in history. I know that we're going through a very unique phase where more planets than normal can be seen right now in the night sky and from Earth without a whole lot of, you know, fancy equipment. And so there's definitely a shifting that's happening right now. That's opening up veils, if you will, and shutting down others, that absolutely need to be shut down. But people's sense of normality, people's sense of continuity is disrupted. People's sense of routine is disrupted. So we keep hearing, getting back to our regular routine. It feels like we're getting back to normal. And there is no normal, people. Understand. The normal we thought we had, that we thought we understood, is behind us. This is the new normal, and this new normal is still transforming. It's not a day that goes by that I'm not grinding up High John root. There's not a day that goes by that I don't have, bay leaf, on hand. It's not a day that goes by that I'm not acting upon spirit. And for the person that's not spiritual, oh man, my heart goes out to you. I don't know how you survive this environment without having something bigger than yourself, greater than yourself, to anchor to get some sense of clarity from.
Going to porn.
So,
They're going to porn. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, you get out here on this road, and I think I put this in the chat, the one thing that I love about truck driving is, for one, the night sky. You get all these astrologers and whatnot that are on the internet using charts and everything, but they don't spend hours looking at how constellations actually move across the sky and all these planets. And as I'm driving, most of the time, I like driving at night just because it's hot. It's hot in the desert. It's hot. I'm sorry. It's hot. I can't do it sometimes. But the night sky is amazing when you're out here, where you're away from the public eye, when you're away from all the light pollution by itself. You're in the cities and you got the light pollution. You can't see what the night sky is actually doing. And now that this virus has taken a hold of us, you got less light pollution. You got less actual commercial pollution, where it's smog and whatnot. And you're able to see some of this stuff that's actually out here. Now you got the time to go outside and actually ponder some of this stuff. Go outside and look at some of these constellations. I mean, how many people in your circle can say that they've actually looked at the Milky Way and realize that you can actually look at this thing without needing a telescope? It's sitting right here. I watch it go across the night sky every night. I see the planets coming out. The lunar eclipse that happened yesterday. As a matter of fact, it was beautiful this morning, seeing the full moon come up. As I'm driving towards the east, so does that big golden moon come up. But how many people appreciate seeing that come all the way up to midpoint in the sky? You don't have the time. You're too busy. Well, you ain't busy no more. What's stopping you? Go and look at it. See what planets are in the skies. Look at these constellations. I mean, our ancestors, mind you, I'm going to put this in here, but our ancestors followed the big dipping spoon to freedom, if they can manage it. You don't think they knew something about some stars or anything? Somebody passed some knowledge to them about the constellations? You got to follow something. You got to navigate something. Well, that ain't changed. It's still in the sky. You want to take a road trip? Think about a road trip. Why don't you try going from the south to the north, just trying to use the highways that are associated with the constellations? And don't think your government didn't put these roads out here all willy-nilly. You got constellations, and whether or not black people live there or not, they go run a highway right through that thing.
Often through corridor of great historic wealth in our community. Often through neighborhoods where black people and businesses own real estate. That is often where these highways and these new industrial parks, are being created. So to literally wipe our history, our footprint off the planet. It takes me back to that Egyptian mindset that, if you could obliterate a man's image, obliterate his name from the stone that you need remove a person from history. And so we said, still being demonstrated in modern times, communities where we struggled to maintain Black families and Black communities for generations are being built over, gentrified over. Chicago is a good example of which I have a connection to Chicago, to this in Chicago. But I also think about the destruction of the Black communities that also existed, often in very large numbers, in these project towers that once, lined the Dan Ryan Expressway, which as a truck driver, I'm sure you're familiar with. Neophyte Bokor, you can't see those buildings anymore because they don't exist anymore. And now they are being gentrified. Now they're being, called mixed income communities. But what happened to those people? What happened to the 20,000, 30,000 people who lived in those buildings? Where are those people today? And what communities are they now feeding and are a part of? Many of them got caught up in the war on drugs. So many of the dads, the husbands, the uncles, the sons, either were murdered or went to prison, for very long periods of time. Remember now, this is before they legalized marijuana all willy-nilly, all over the place. We still have beloveds that are serving time, over marijuana. But all of these extensions operated to destroy our communities and destroy our cultural centers and destroy our places of spiritual and financial empowerment. And so my goal, my dream, my vision is for us to create that right here in this space, and that we continue to grow this so that the next generation does not have that as an excuse, as a block, as a buffer. We indeed know that what's being offered to us is not beneficial to us. So let's create what's beneficial for us. Let's create what we find solace in, what we find salvation in, what we find gratitude in, and make that continue to work. That is where I am right now during the shutdown. I'm planning for tomorrow. I'm planning for the next day. I'm doing more than just surviving through for the moment. Because whenever we come out of the illusion of this pandemic, whether it's when they find an antidote, whether it's when they find some sort of pharmaceutical, financially feasible fix for it, we don't know when that illusion of ending of this cycle, no more than polio or some of the things that we fought. But we do know that when we do come out of this, when historians do start writing and looking back, what were you doing? Where is your footprint? What were you planning for? We don't want to just sit and get bigger and get older and get uglier and, all the other natural things that might be happening, right now. We absolutely need to lay some foundations for the next generation to follow. I'm working on a book right now, a published book. It's a bit of a mystery because I don't want to give too much of it away. You got your people out there who will be glad to try and jump on it. So I will never say much about it other than I'm working on a book. And it's going to be a deep book. It's going to be an intense book. But my goal in doing so will be to provide a foundation, a unified foundation across African ethnicities, across Black ethnic groups in which we all can come together on, and particularly ancestors.
Right. I'm going to go through a dead zone. I'm going to head and drop off the feed so I don't interrupt.
Okay.
Got the Bermuda Triangle of phone service that I'm getting ready to roll through right now.
Well, we appreciate that.
Not a problem. It's coincidentally, I'm actually getting ready to drive through a ley line right now. that's why I lose service. Native American tribe is right on the other side of the freeway right here too.
That's in Beaumont?
Excuse me?
That's in Beaumont, or are you in another area?
No, that's in between Texas and New Mexico.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
got you. I think I have a good idea where you are.
Mm-hmm.
A general idea of where you are.
A general idea. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and drop off here. I'm gonna keep on listening as much as I can, but I'm getting ready to dive deep into this little ley line right here.
All
right,
is a blessing.
Always a blessing. Peace.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we're going through a shift. We're going through a change. We're going through a transformation. And those who would go with this, gel with this, are going to find great prosperity on the other side. I said that all through the month of March, that there are those among us right now who will be wealthy in a year, who will be successful in a year because books, plays, songs, ideas that they would move forward in right now, that they would push forward right now. I appreciate all the activity and all the love and support. It's so many people jumping in right now. It's slowing things down a little bit. But I greet each and every one of you. Lola Noble, greetings, beloved. Thank you so much for your active participation. Locked in Divine Journey, thank you so much. You can always go back and check it out in the archive, beloved. You can archive it on YouTube, or you can archive it on Blog Talk Radio. I invite you all to join me on Blog Talk Radio, subscribe, follow me, become a follower on Blog Talk Radio. I would greatly appreciate that, as well as those of you who are clicking like and showing love and support here in this format. Somebody always loves the StreamYard show. I don't know how you're doing it, or why you're the only number one that seems to manage to get up there. But whoever's doing it, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the love and the support. Yes, beloved, I start at high noon every day. That might be 11 where you are, or 1 where you are, depending on where you're positioned in the world. But I come in at 12 noon U.S. Central Standard Time every day. And often I've been doing 2-hour shows, 3-hour shows, which has allowed the Goddess Initiative. Your comment threw me off of what I was getting ready to say. Yeah, which allows people to sort of come into the show, at their leisure. I'm trying to limit me standing at the computer for 3 hours every day. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't elevated your computer, you should. If you want to be healthier, happier, leaner, if you want to take some stress off your body, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to gain weight, you need to stand at your computer. That damage to your blood circulation and to your nerves, with you sitting for long hours at the computer, is really, really dangerous to do. It's been scientifically documented. Many of you know that one of my adjustments during this season of COVID-19 was to elevate my computer. And it's indeed one of the best things I've ever done. And even while you're standing, you could do squats, you can stretch, you can do leg lifts, you can get your steps in. You can get a lot more exercise in, and it's much healthier for the body. Yes, the Goddess Initiative. If you didn't know, beloved, I was born in Chicago. I only spent 3 or 4 years in Chicago as a baby. And then I went back to Chicago in my teens, in my 20s, in my 30s, in my 40s. And then I have brothers and sisters, blood brothers and sisters, who've been in Chicago all their life. My cousins, first cousins, second cousins, on both sides of my family, paternal and maternal, are in Chicago, between Chicago and St. Louis. So I got people on the south side, I got people on the west side, I got people, you know, on the north side of Chicago. Yeah, and Chicago is forever going to be my home, if you will. But New Orleans is where I do my work. New Orleans is where I have my living and my being. Who I am and what I'm doing would not have been possible in Chicago. I couldn't find the right living scenario in Chicago. The housing is just so expensive, and then you got that winter, you know, to deal with, you know, and the utility bills associated with, you know, it was just a lot. I went through the blizzard of 1999. I don't know how old you are, but yeah, I was there for the blizzard of 1999, and I said, no more, never again. And was it 98 or 99? Right in there. And so I've been in New Orleans ever since. I've been in the South ever since. I followed the ancestors, and the ancestors brought me home to the South. Yeah, 2020 is a bit of a blackout year. Y'all are chatting it up so quickly, I can't even see or address everything quickly enough that's being said in the chat. Ria Koruk, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Seattle? Really? Oh, I have no feelings about Seattle one way or the other. I've driven through there, but I've never spent any time there. And it's not a part of the country that I've ever really wanted to focus on. I lived in Denver, Colorado for 3 years. That was intense. Culturally, racially, that was intense. I left Denver, Colorado right before they lynched that young Ethiopian man on Capitol Hill in downtown Denver. One of the most racist cities I've ever lived in, Denver, Colorado. Beautiful place, beautiful place, beautiful bike trails, walking trails, just amazing. But in terms of culture, you heard of a food desert, it's a cultural desert in Denver, Colorado. I tried Milwaukee for a few months. Whew. I still got a sister and nieces and nephews that live in Milwaukee. And they always talking about leaving Milwaukee, but somehow they never do. So I've had my range of visitations across the country, particularly in my younger years. And so I have a great feel for where culture is, where the people are, where the jobs are at any given place and time, and where the creativity is happening. And so Spirit kept directing me back to the South and to the Deep South. And so now, you know, going on 24 years, I'm still here. Locked out Divine Journey, 2020 blackout. I need you to get online with us and talk about that a little bit more. I'm not familiar exactly with what you're talking about. I've heard of various protests for instance, for 4th of July, but I don't recall seeing any posts of Black people wearing all black representing 4th of July. I didn't see that. Maybe I missed it because I worked through the whole weekend. So if there is a blackout, if that's what you're talking about, and us just supporting, yeah, it's going to be challenging. It forces us to acknowledge what we don't have, what we don't own, what we don't create, what we don't make, what we don't have control of. The one thing I'm grateful for is my ability to be in control of spirit, to be in control of what I believe, to be in control of how I demonstrate religion and culture and ethnicity in America. Some of you don't like how I look. Some of you don't like how I dress. This is a conscious choice. I choose not to wear Western attire. I choose not to reinforce your Italian and your French fashions and your American, fashions. I choose to reinforce that which reinforces me. I choose to demonstrate and show up in that which demonstrates support for me and for who I am. And in this present so-called post-racial society, in this present, awareness of white supremacy and racism and police brutality, now more than ever, do I choose to do me? Do I choose to style me? Do I choose to represent the ancestors that hold me up and defended me when none of you were there to defend me? There were no Black churches, no Black organizations to help this runaway kid off the street. There were no Black churches, no Black leaders, no Black organizations to help this runaway kid on the street at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Where were y'all then? And what were y'all doing? And check the age. I'm a child of the 60s. So I've been around. I didn't see the Nation of Islam. I didn't see the Ansuru turn into the present day Nuwapus and Nuwapians. I've seen the Moors come and go. I've seen the churches. I've seen the prosperity ministry grow up and create itself. I've been there. I've seen it. And we tried everything except the mother. We've returned to everything except the father. We've returned to everything except what is most akin to who we are. And that's what this demonstration is about. That's what this demonstration is about. This is not just about being African, because some of you think I should choose. Well, I should choose to be African. I should choose to be American. I should choose to be indigenous. I should choose to be multiracial or biracial or what have you. And that just keeps, the arguments going. I embrace every aspect of who and what I am. I embrace every aspect of who and what my ancestors are. But I choose to be Black. I choose to be African. I choose to be Voodoo. I choose to be Hoodoo. I choose it. Indeed, it gives me the comfort, the support that I need, that I require to move through this experience that we, as Black people in America, are having today. And I'm grateful. I don't care how you feel about it. I'm grateful. This saved my life. This protected me from becoming a statistic. This set me on a very specific course in my journey that afforded me to pass certain crossroads, to pass over certain creeks and certain land bridges, but also allowed me entryway into a space that I think is our only salvation today. This is our only salvation today. Oh, you don't have to agree. And you can choose to go up the west side of the mountain if you want to. But this is our salvation. It has been since Kunta Kinte. It has been since the Amistad. It has been since the time of Marcus Garvey. It has been since the time of the idea of repatriation and going back to something that's more in line with who we are. See, it's hard for me to talk about Maafa and then not talk about Back to Africa and the Back to Africa movement. The Back to Africa movement took the view in the 19th century that African Americans of African ancestry should return to Africa, not to the homelands of their ancestors, which in many cases were unknown, but to the continent. In general, the movement was an overwhelming failure. Very few free slaves wanted to move to Africa, and the small number that did some under duress, initially faced brutal conditions. As the failure became known in the United States in the 1820s, it spawned and energized the abolitionist movement, the failure of the Back to Africa movement. Liberia and Sierra Leone became independent Black countries after Haiti, January 1st, 1804, and became the second and third of the only three countries founded by former U.S. slaves. U.S. ambassador to Liberia was a coveted position. In the 20th century, Marcus Garvey, the Rastafarians, and some other African Americans espoused the concept of back to Africa or repatriation, but few actually left. Few actually did it. And again, I'm grateful for my age. I know some people personally who went to Ethiopia, personally who went to Israel. Some, one in particular went to Israel, had cancer, and had to come back to America. Is part of our New Orleans community, and may she rest in a room. Eventually passed on. So I'm aware of people personally who repatriated. Ghana now espouses an open door policy to African Americans seeking to repatriate to Africa and then set up livelihoods, if you will, in Ghana. And again, my question is, if we don't adjust the mindset, whether we're talking about African Americans, whether we're talking about Ghanaians, if we don't adjust the mindset, then we're only repeating what's already have been done, which was not successful, just in a different location. We got to address the mindset. The question of where free Blacks of American birth should reside was not much discussed by white writers and authors in the 18th century. At the time of the American Revolution, there had been few free Blacks anywhere in the country. In 1776, slavery was legal in all 13 of the British colonies that became the United States in 1776. There was legal slavery in all 13 of the British colonies that became the United States. There's your 4th of July. There was a small number of free Blacks who worked and lived in various of the colonies. Pressures for ending slavery began small but grew steadily. Various philosophical and religious condemnations of it, especially by the Quakers, were published. Slavery became illegal in the UK in 1772 by court decision. You can look at Somerset versus Stewart, and in the British colonies by statute in 1838. In France, slavery was illegal at least since the 16th century and as part of the French Revolution. It was abolished in French colonies in 1794, although it was restored from 1802 to 1848. Starting in 1791, the slaves of Saint Dominique, we now know as Dominican Republic in Haiti, revolted, gaining their freedom and established the free Black country of Haiti. Starting with Pennsylvania and Massachusetts in 1780, slavery was gradually abolished in all of the northern states, although this did not mean that existing slaves were all freed. Vermont, which at the time was not part of the United States, abolished slavery in 1777. By the 1850 census, there are no slaves in the free states. There were still hundreds in the 1840 census and millions in the South. In the South, sometimes influenced by appeals from preachers, abolitionism in the United States had a strong religious component. Some individuals freed their slaves or left in their wills instructions to free them upon the death of the owner, of the masters. The number of free blacks in the United States skyrocketed, and the question of what to do with them steadily grew in importance. Even when free, most were not citizens with no legal rights, as the Dred Scott decision made clear. Usually seen as a racially inferior, few believed them a desirable or even a possible part of American society. We were prohibited from living in some areas, and there was legal discrimination that is considered astounding under today's conditions. Black passengers on riverboats were not allowed in the captain, but had to stay on deck, whatever the weather was. In Florida, each free black man had to have a white man who could be sued for the Negro's misdeeds, if any, since blacks could neither sue nor be sued. The Quaker Zephaniah Kingsley, who believed in the amalgamation of the races was desirable, was forced to leave the country of Haiti. In the South, free blacks who could not learn to read or write were often in touch with abolitionist writings. The slave owners who controlled those states saw the free blacks as a threat to the stability of their economy and society and made no secret of their desire to get rid of them. So now you have a new free slave problem. And Farrakhan would suggest we still have a freed black slave problem in America. Much of the African American population was freed people seeking opportunity. Many Southern free blacks migrated to the industrial North, Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, to seek employment, while others moved to surrounding Southern states, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas. Until this day, our numbers are still highest in the Deep South. Our numbers are still highest in the Southern states. Our progress was met with hostility, as many whites were not used to sharing space with blacks in contexts outside of chattel slavery. Many did not believe that free Africans had a place in America. In the North, many whites believed that blacks could not achieve equality in the United States and therefore pushed for their immigration to Africa, even though most had been born in the US and had never seen Africa. Such sentiment was not exclusive to Northerners. One proponent of colonization movement, Solomon Parker of Hampshire County, Virginia, was quoted as having said, "I am not willing that the man or any of my blacks shall ever be freed to remain in the United States. Am opposed to slavery and was opposed to freeing blacks to stay in our country, and do sincerely hope that the time is approaching when our land shall be freed or rid of them." Riots swept the free states in waves, usually in urban areas where there had been recent immigration of blacks from the South. The height of these riots was in 1819, with 25 riots recorded, resulting in many injuries and fatalities. Although riots continued up until the 1830s, the Back to Africa movement was seen as the solution to these problems by both groups, and more support from the white population than from the black population to send us back to Africa. Blacks often viewed the project, going back to Africa, with skepticism, particularly among middle class blacks, who feared that the colonization movement was a ploy to deport free African Americans to restrict their effort against slavery. Shortly after the foundation of the American Colonization Society, 3,000 free blacks gathered in a church in Philadelphia and issued forth a declaration stating that they will never separate ourselves voluntarily from the slave population of the country. Similarly, Black leaders such as James Forten, who had previously supported the colonization movement, changed their minds as a result of widespread Black resistance to the idea. Religious motivation for colonization. Following what was called the Great Awakening, in which America was swept by a wave of religious fervor, many enslaved African Americans converted to Christianity. At the same time, many religious people in America struggled to reconcile slavery with their so-called Catholic and Christian beliefs. When the enslaved population of America was mostly Muslim or practiced indigenous African religions, slavery was substantiated on Christian evangelical grounds. We were heathens. Therefore, we deserved enslavement in order to expose us to Christianity. That was the belief. That was the understanding behind that. At the same time, many religious people in America were struggling to reconcile against slavery with their Christian belief. Many Black Muslims, Black Africans who practice indigenous traditions were still in conflict, at odds with abolitionists who were using Christianity to sort of humanize us, if you will, in the presence of such voyages played an important role in the colonization movement. Thank Okay, there I am. Can y'all see me in the chat? Am I good? Neophyte, Bokor, Keisha, are y'all with me? I kind of bleeped out for a second. Yeah, YouTube be hating, so I don't know if I'm still broadcasting or not. Can y'all see me? Am I there? Are you with me? Oh, okay. Thank you, y'all. All right. Because I was getting ready to hit end. Thank you. Yes, so early on, there indeed was a Back to Africa movement. And if I haven't made it clear enough, it was often supported even more so by whites than blacks because they saw us as being a remaining problem here in the US. So many blacks resisted it under the guise of that whole religious thing. And then I think that even more involved into the sense of ownership that we built this land, that we built this place, and therefore we should stay or we should remain. There was what's called the American Colonization Society, was an early advocate of the idea of resettling American-born blacks in Africa. founded in 1816 by Charles Fenton Mercer. It was composed of two core groups, abolitionists and slave owners. Abolitionist members believed in freeing African slaves, along with their descendants, and providing them with an opportunity to return to Africa. Slave-owning members believed free blacks endangered the system of slavery and sought to expel them from America by means of migration. Since its inception, the American Colonization Society struggled to garner support from within free black communities. During the late 1840s and early 1850s, the creation of an independent Liberian state splintered the nearly uniform voice against colonization. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 provided the United States government ample power to recapture fugitive slaves. Following its passage, many black leaders promoted immigration and colonization to a nation that will provide and protect their rights. In spite of this, several black critics were outspoken against the Back to Africa movement and the activities of the American Colonization Society. A report from a free black political conference in New York warned all kinds of shenanery and stratagem will be employed to allure the people to this colony, the independence of its inhabitants, the employment and privileges of its citizens will be pictured forth in glowing colors to deceive you. According to the Encyclopedia of Georgia History and Culture, as early as 1820, Black Americans had begun to return to their ancestral homeland through the auspices of the American Colonization Society. By 1847, the American Colonization Society founded Liberia, a land to be settled by Black people returning from the United States of America. Between 1822, just for clarity, 1822 is exactly 100 years before my mother's mother was born. So between 1822 and the American Civil War, the American Colonization Society had migrated approximately 15,000 free blacks back to Africa, and most specifically, Liberia. Notable members of the American Colonization Society included Thomas Buchanan, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Abraham Lincoln, James Madison, Daniel Webster, John Marshall, and Francis Scott Key. All were white, most were Southern, and in addition, most were slave owners. Other pre-Civil War attempts. In 1811, Paul Kufi, a black man who was a wealthy man of property, a petitioner for equal rights for blacks, began to explore the idea of black people returning to their native land. Convinced that opportunities for the advancement of black people were limited in America, he became interested in African colonization. With the help of Quakers in Philadelphia, he was able to transport 38 blacks to Freetown, Sierra Leone in 1815. Martin Delany, an African American, in 1854 led the National Immigration Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. He visited Liberia and made plans, largely unrealized, to assist more blacks in relocating. The Back to Africa movement eventually began to decline, but would see a revival again in 1877 at the end of the Reconstruction era, as many blacks in the South faced violence from groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, and of course, lynching. Interest among the South's black population in African immigration peaked during 1890, a time when racism reached its peak and the greatest number of lynchings in American history took place. The continued experience of segregation, discrimination, and the belief that they would never achieve true equality attracted many blacks to a Pan-African emancipation in their motherland. And that is the root origin of the idea and the concept of Pan-Africanism, which is a part of my platform, which is part of my intro to this show. The movement declined again following many hoaxes, fraudulent activities associated with the movement. According to Crumrin, however, the most important reason for the decline in the Back to Africa movement was that the vast minority of those people who were meant to colonize did not wish to go. Most free blacks simply did not want to go home to a place from which they were generations removed. America was not Africa. Africa was not their home. America was considered their home, and they had little desire to migrate to a strange and forbidding land not their own. They often said that they were no more African than Americans were British. Florida Governor Napoleon Bonaparte Broward, which is where the Broward County name comes from, he lived from 1905 to 1909. He was the Florida governor from 1905 to 1909, called for blacks to be permanently moved to the land the federal government would purchase, either foreign or domestic. After buying their respective properties, a territory would be established where blacks could not leave and whites could not enter. Early 20th century attempts at resettlement were made, such as by those of Chief Alfred Sam between 1913 and 1915. The eventual disillusionment of those who migrated to the north and the frustrations of struggling to cope with urban life set the scene for the Back to Africa movement in the 1920s. My grandmother was born in 1922. The 1920s opened the idea of Back to Africa, established by Marcus Garvey. Many of those who migrated to the northern states from the South found that although they were financially better off, they remained at the bottom, both economically and socially. So the movement picked up once again in the decade or so preceding the Second World War. Activists in the Peace Movement of Ethiopia organization were committed to Black immigration to West Africa in order to escape the torrid social conditions they were experiencing in the United States due to the depression. They harbored an almost utopian vision of Liberia, created from a simultaneous vision of Pan-Africanism and a belief that the Americanization that they would provide would heal Liberia's social and economic troubles. So therein, it suggests that even in that return to Liberia, return to the motherland, they knew that they would also be importing this Western American idea that at least at that time they thought would be a solution to Liberia's social and economic troubles. And those of us who remember the 1990s know how well that turned out. Liberia went through a major civil war in the 1990s. Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, that region. As part of the mass letter writing campaign she undertook in 1934, prominent PME member Mittie Maud Lena Gordon wrote to Ernest Sevier Cox, a white supremacist from Richmond, Virginia. She managed to convince him to support their cause, playing on their mutual goal of racial separation. Cox provided influential connections that the movement had previously lacked, and he gave the issue of Black immigration political exposure when he managed to convince members of the Virginia General Assembly to recommend the U.S. Congress provide financial aid for this in 1936. Now, my father was born in 1938. This is 2 years before my father was born. So this helps you to put it into context. We're not talking about 500 years ago. His support soon began to diminish, and so Gordon looked elsewhere. And once again, finding an unlikely ally on the opposite side of the moral compass in Senator Theodore Bilbo, an ardent white supremacist. Billboard had been campaigning within government for racial separation for a while. He proposed an amendment to the House Joint Resolution 679, a work relief bill in 1938 that would have repatriated African American volunteers to Liberia, providing them with financial assistance. This amendment was endorsed by Marcus Garvey and the UNIA at the 8th International UNIA Convention. This provided the precedent for the movement to progress. Bilbo had the political capital to get the issue of Black repatriation into wide-scale political debate. This continued, and in early 1939, Bilbo began drafting what came to be known as the Greater Liberia Bill. The bill suggested that the United States purchase 400,000 square miles of African land off English and French, credited them as, wait a minute. The bill suggested that the United States purchase 400,000 square miles of African land off England and France, crediting them as war debts, and provide financial assistance for Black Americans to relocate to Africa. Outside of the Black nationalism movement, the bill did not garner much support, with leading civil rights groups such as the NAACP refusing to endorse it and the national press lambasting it. The bill was also not met with any real support in the Senate, and thus the idea of Black repatriation lost much of its traction with the outbreak of the Second World War, almost making any passing of the bill unlikely. And I'm not going to read the entire page. You can just look up Back to Africa movement, and you can access it as a Wikipedia document. And so the idea, the notion of separation is not new. It's not modern in any way. And it's something that we've looked at many times over the last few hundred years. And it continues to exist and be present just beneath the surface. Greetings, Mom. Peace and blessings. I didn't realize you had come into the room. Yeah, you also, the goddess, you remember that Chicago blizzard. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you all. It's been a great 2-hour show. Forgive me if I talked beyond your comfort zone. So much going on in the chat. It's hard sometimes to keep up with what's going on in the chat. And I keep saying I'm going to get Kiona signed into this account so that she can handle the chat. Shop Black only starts on the 7th. That's tomorrow. So that's tomorrow. Thank you kindly. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I'm going to end the show momentarily. I just want to acknowledge everyone and your comments, particularly in the chat. I don't see any questions, so I'm sure Kiona would have popped in and let me know. I hope you all are staying safe, staying clean, being still, being sensible, being conscious. being erudite in this present season. You all know what's going on. You all see what's happening. This ain't the time to be flocking to no parties and no celebrations. This just ain't the time. I think repatriation in the consciousness, repatriation of the mind is more important than anything. I agree with my mother. We want the white people to understand us when we don't even understand ourselves or know our own history. Absolutely. And I'm not agreeing just because that's my mother. Yes, indeed. I thank you all for being present and for standing up with me for another powerful edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo. New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. I don't know what happened with my Blog Talk Radio connection. It just gave out on me. So I'm grateful for any opportunity to come forward and speak and share. Oh my goodness, there's so many comments in the chat. Thank you so much, you all. I love you all. I support you all. I got appointments today, so I'll be forward with you momentarily. I'll be cleaning up my emails. So if you've reached out to me in the last 9 days, and if I haven't gotten back to you, please forgive me. Just shoot me another email, remind me, knock me on the head or something, and I'll get with you. Orixa, Chef Bougie, I absolutely want to hear from you all today. I love you. I support you. I thank you all so much for being present and hanging in here with me for another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Ashe all.